Bam! What's going on, everyone? And welcome to the show. This is another episode of what's the show called again? the Ominus Morning Show, and I am your host. My name is Elliot Rodriguez. You can see it right here, and yeah, I am an artist of sorts, and I draw stuff in the indie scene. But you guys should know that by now. But anyways, I'm really excited. I have a guest that I have wanted to have on for a long time. I've been a follower of this person's work. You've seen it in the thumbnails. I'm talking about my man John Hervey, and I'm going to bring him on in just a second. And yeah, I'm excited to have him on. A follower of his work. I'm a subscriber to his digital comics. I'm glad that he offers that. Otherwise, I'd be missing out on a lot of good content. And today we're going to talk about a project that I have not read, but I'm looking forward to reading. I have read some of his other work. So yeah. So without any further ado, please give a big round of applause for my guest, John Hervey. Hey, what's going on, man?
How's it going, Elliot, man?
Yeah, I'm doing good, man. I'm doing great. Thank you very much for coming on the show. I'm as I mentioned earlier, I'm a big fan of yours.
Appreciate that.
I first came across you and your work with the Magna Pantheon of Heroes comic.
Yep.
You put that out a few years ago, I think. And,
That's right.
Yeah, I was really impressed because what attracted me to that story is I think I've mentioned this to you before, but what attracted me to that story at first was seeing who was the artist on that book. You had this Brazilian artist,
Marcio Abreu.
Yeah, Marcio. I followed him on Instagram, and he was like one of the first artists that I came across when I was doing my art stuff, and I really was a fan of his work. And when I saw that you had got him on the book, I was like, man, that's crazy. How did that happen? And I was really surprised, and so that led me to picking up the book. And yeah, I got the series. Really good story. I enjoyed your take on the mythos of the Roman mythology and stuff like that. And it was really good. And yeah, man, I've been a follower and a fan since, and I'm looking forward to checking out this recent comic. It's called the Black Tiger Hidden Dragon.
That's right. Man, I appreciate that, man. I mean, Magna was that was just a lot of fun. You know, that story. You know, I always loved mythology when I was growing up as a kid. So you know, being able to you know, kind of intertwine different mythos and kind of you know, use basically a common thread to link them all. And you know, I used kind of Genesis 6 to link them all. And just to give a really fun story, man. That's what comics are supposed to be. It's supposed to be fun.
Yeah, definitely. And is that without getting too much into that, but is that like a public domain story, or is that just your take on the character, or is there a particular storyline
that was my take? So Magna is a proprietary character, so I created her, but but a majority of the other characters are public domain or mythos, you know. So like, I mean, you know, the references to, you know, the brothers Magni, Modi, those are mythological characters. Thor, Sif, all those. So it's kind of a nice kind of combination, you know. So using mythos or public domain characters plus adding some of my own private IP into it.
Nice. That's excellent. Yeah, it was a good mix, and yeah, I'm a big fan of Marcio's work, and awesome stuff, man.
I wanted to say hi to.
Yeah, he's a really good artist. He's a really good artist, and I want to say hi to Pops. Pops is in the chat.
What's up, Pops?
And thank you for everybody checking this out either now or in the replay. I really appreciate the viewership. And yeah, so what do you have for us now? You have what is this? What can you tell us about this recent story?
So Black Tiger is actually my, I'd almost call it my flagship property because it's the first property that I ever published.
Okay.
So the way I first published it. So Rod Looper, I've been working with him for over 20 years, and basically, wow. Yeah. So I mean, when we first published Black Tiger, this I want to say was back in 2005, but we did it through, using through the comic shop. So you had to get in, an ad in the big Diamond Encyclopedia of books. You have to put in a solicitation. Comic shop owners got to try and find it and order it. So it was, it was a whole. It was I had experienced that process, but I'd never experienced it before as an independent. And I was like, man, it was just a tough business model. It wasn't a good business model for an independent. So we did four issues, but then we stopped it at 4 just because kind of the opposite of what's kind of happening with indie books. It's like with those books, especially indies back then, it's like shops would maybe pick up your number 1 book and your number 1 would do decently, but then Diamond, so let's say a shop wants to reorder it. Let's say there's like 500 units worth of reorders. Diamond won't order it because they want to have 1,000+ units. So it's like comic shops wanted to pick up more of the book, but there wasn't enough volume for Diamond to say, okay, we're going to reorder it. And then your numbers just start to go like this. So by the time we got to the 4th issue, I was just like, man, this is crazy. This is not working. So at that point, we stopped at issue 4 in terms of producing the book and putting them out in floppy form. At that point, in all honesty, there wasn't a lot that was still captivating me, in the comic book market. Yeah. And I'm a longtime comic book fan. I mean, I've been reading comics since I was little. So, the stories were less and less grabbing me anyway. So at that point, Rod and I, we continued to do stuff. We were publishing digitally, but we weren't publishing, physical books anymore. Wow. And then, kind of this whole comic renaissance happened with, CG and Indiegogo and all this kind of stuff. And that's when we got back on board in terms of trying to get physical, but, physical copies of our books. But then it also gave us opportunities to get our digital copies of our books out to folks because, it's sometimes it's the easiest way to get a hold of a book sometimes is to be able to get a digital copy of it. Maybe enables folks to back more or, for different reasons, it makes sense for folks to have a digital option. So we're able to provide that too.
Yeah, I think it's a more feasible way of expanding your fan base also. Cause I mean, and now with the internet and everything, you can have fans across the globe. And then if they can't necessarily get your book, then how do you keep them hooked? Because but yeah, that's awesome. So so you have seen like the rise of all this, what we're dealing with now, and what has been your impression of that? Like, what do you say to that? Like, how?
Honestly, I think this is just the beginning, because
nice.
Because I mean, I remember when there were comic books that did 1 million units, not $1 million.
Yeah,
1 million units. Superman was a 1 million unit book. Back in the day, and it's like, but distribution was way different. Because the way I got into comics was, I would go to the local drugstore with my mom, and there'd be a spinner rack there, and then the 7-Eleven across the street also had a spinner rack. The craziest thing is the first time I picked up a comic, I went to. So my mom used to go to the hair, she'd go to the hair salon, and man, that was torture because the hair salon. When black women go to the hair salon, you're there for at least 2 hours. This is a 2 or 3 hour affair. I'm like, oh my gosh. But the store owner, she started purchasing comics and putting them in her little lobby.
Yeah.
She had like these Fantastic Four comics and some different comics there. So then I actually started reading comics, just waiting for my mom while she was getting her hair done. And then when we go to the local drugstore, I'd start picking up comics. And I didn't really know much about comics. I mean, at the time I was, there were cartoons that I liked. I mean, I could see the old Spider-Man cartoons, old Super Friends. So they're characters that I knew. Like, even at the time, I didn't realize that the Justice League and the Super Friends I didn't realize there was a connection there. So I would look for like a Super Friends comic book, but I couldn't find one. But I'd find like Batman, I could find Wonder Woman, I could find Superman, and I could see Spider-Man and the Hulk. These are characters that I knew. And then kind of from there, I started broadening my horizons. And then one day I picked up this book that looked really cool. And it was The Mighty Avengers. It was number 184. Had some characters I knew. So like I knew Iron Man, but I didn't know these other cool characters. I mean, like the Vision was on there. Miss Marvel was on there. The Beast. I didn't know these characters, but they looked dope. So then I picked it up and I read it and I loved it. Absolutely loved it. And I read it over and over again. I told my mom, I was like, Mom, I am now a comic book collector. And she's like, and I've been reading this comic throughout the course of the day. We're at the dinner table. She's like, that's good, baby. Go finish your greens. Finish your string beans. That's good. But I really had become at that point, I was like, I love this medium. I love comics. And the big thing for me is when I first started picking up comics, I really wasn't much into reading, and my mom was like, if I can get this boy anything that will get him to read. So, I picked it up and you go through the pictures, and I got about 80% of the story going through the pictures. Then eventually I actually started reading, and it sounds funny, but I'd have my comics and I'd have a dictionary looking up words because, I was learning.
That's actually true because I actually learned a lot of good words from comics. There's a lot of that's why like the people that always down talk comics, it's like very boorish. No, they got really good vernacular in the books, and it's always good. I totally agree with you. So you would say, John, that your parents were supportive of your reading comics, looking at comics?
Absolutely. My mom was all for it because she's like, if I can get this boy to read anything, it's funny because some of her friends are like, man, why are you getting this boy comics? He's barely even doing his school reading, but it poured over because it got me into reading. So then, then I started, becoming more comfortable reading. I started reading fiction and nonfiction. And it actually made me much more of a voracious reader. So I think, comics in and of itself, it's a special medium because it's kind of left brain, right brain. I mean, you've got the images, you're following the pictures, but you have to read it. You've got these still images. So in your mind, you're kind of filling in the art in between the pictures. Yeah. I think it's a very active, medium for somebody when you're reading a book because, the art is there, the words are there, but it's like I can remember the first time I was watching Spider-Man and His Amazing Friends. I remember the first time they had an episode with the X-Men, and I remember they had Wolverine, but the way they did Wolverine and Spider-Man and His Amazing Friends is he actually had a French Canadian accent, and I've never heard him play that way ever since. So he had this French Canadian.
That's supposedly how he's supposed to be, right? Because he's from
exactly.
Oh, yeah.
So he had this French Canadian accent, and I remember because this was like a big event. So like me and my friends, we would watch Spider-Man and His Amazing Friends, but we knew that this next episode was going to have the X-Men. So I spent the night at my boy's house. And then we got up the next day. We're watching. You got your regular series of cartoons. Then Spider-Man and His Amazing Friends comes on. It's the X-Men episode. We're enjoying the episode, and Wolverine speaks, and me and my dude look at each other. We're just like, and then we kind of keep watching the show, and then we're like, that makes sense though, because we've been reading the comics at that point. We're like, yeah, he's French Canadian. That makes sense. Okay, that's dope. But whenever you're reading a comic, either whether you know it like consciously or subconsciously, you kind of have in your own mind what you think that character sounds like. Then like for instance, when I picked up Spider-Man, my first exposure to Spider-Man was the 60s cartoon. So I already had like a voice in my mind of what Spider-Man sounded like. And, I'd watched the Super Friends and all these. So, but like I had no voice in my mind for what would Wolverine sound like? What would Colossus sound like? And it was pretty cool because they really tried to stick to, giving these guys the accents that they would have, and I was like, oh, that's pretty dope.
That's something that I appreciated. I'm sorry to cut you off, but just something that I appreciated from the Deadpool a movie, that they gave Colossus that Russian accent. I think it was just perfect.
Yeah, and it's easy to, especially when you're reading, you're filling all those things in for yourself. And as a kid at that age, I had no real exposure to what those things would have sounded like, really. So I was like, I had some idea kind of what French would sound like. And like, you watch some gangster type movies, you hear the Russian accents, but it was kind of cool. But at the same time, I realized what a creative exercise it is when you're reading a comic or when you're reading period, especially when you're reading this diverse set of characters, because you're basically, as you're reading it in your own mind, in your own mind's ear, I don't even know if that's a thing, you have the voices of these characters. So you bring so much to the table when you read a comic book, because you fill in all the gaps. I love watching the animated shows, but you're just nothing disparaging about it, but you're just along for the ride. I mean, they give you everything. They got the voices, they got everything. I mean, so it's like you're just there, you're along for the ride. But when you're reading a comic, you're an active participant. Yeah. And I love that about comics.
You can fill in. Awesome, man. And you've been reading comics for a long, long time. And what made you make the conscious decision, like, okay, I think it's time for me to start making my own comics? Like, when did that happen? And how do you know if you're ready to create comics?
I think at the end of it. So for me, growing up, once I got a hold of comics, I started making strips. So like, Space Ghost was my guy. So like Space Ghost cartoons would come on. So I would make like Space Ghost comic strips, because I love Space Ghost. I think at the end of the day, it's a process. It's something that, like most things in life, you got to jump into it, and you've got to get into the creative process. When I was growing up, there were no classes for these things. There were no classes for comic book writing. There weren't even classes for comic book art. I mean, now there's sequential art classes. Now there are classes on how to write comics. I mean, I think for a lot of us, it was a matter of, okay, you see the differences in these different media. You take creative writing classes. You learn how to write prose. You learn how to, write for those different kinds of media. I took classes on, creative writing. I took classes on movie writing, on TV writing, and comics are absolutely different. Yeah, it's different. It's a different style of writing than all of it. And the thing that I've kind of, so like when I write comics, and so let me take a step back. When I first started writing comics, at least professionally, I was working at Motown Animation for Michael Davis, who's one of the founders of Milestone. And he was like, listen, he's like, the way comics work, and he showed me this too when we would go to a comic shop. He would pick up the books and he would skim the book first, and then he'd read it. And I'm like, why are you ruining the book for yourself by doing that? He's like, no. He's like, listen, like I go through the book, I should see 80 to 90% of the story told just through the images. And then the rest of that important seminal 10 to 15%, I'll pick it up by reading. And he's like, if the sequential art is good, I can follow the sequential art. And if the writing is good, the writing will fill in the things that the art didn't tell me. Yeah. But if the writing is just telling me things that the art is already telling me, then you're overwriting the book.
Yeah, I noticed that in the earlier comics, like in the first issues of Marvel comics back in the 60s, that's mostly what it was like. It was like Stan Lee just like basically telling you word for word what was happening in the panel, and it was like so much text in those panels. No, so it makes sense not to do that. No?
So, but there were some good things that they did. So in a certain regard, you're like, man, there's so much text here, and sometimes you feel like, man, they're telling me things that I can see. But you know what the good thing about how they wrote comics is that you could pick up Fantastic Four 200 and not have to have read 1 through 199. And what they always did was they always made sure that they gave you enough context for where you were in that moment. Because sometimes you feel like, man, why is Johnny Storm describing all this stuff? Yeah. Because if you hadn't read the book, if you hadn't read the series before, and you don't know where things are at, they always gave you a jumping on point.
Yeah, and I like the editor notes that they would include sometimes also. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, because I started reading Avengers, the Mighty Avengers, at 184. That's where I picked it up. That's when I said I'm now a collector. I started collecting it from 184 and went on for a very long time. And then over time, I picked up old issues. And it was really cool when you pick up the old issue and you get to read it. But I didn't ever need the old issues. You know, like it's not like I picked up 184 and I was just like, oh man, I'm lost if I don't read these first 183 issues. Because the medium was so different. The medium was so different. I think, you know, people would read comics and they weren't collectors, right? That was the reason why those comics are so valuable. You know, it's like people put them in their attics, their moms threw them away. So those comics had to be self-contained. Even though the characters were kind of marching through their progression, they had to be self-sustained enough that if somebody picked it up at issue 184, I can run from here and I can have fun and not feel like I'm missing a whole bunch by not, you know, having seen the first 183 issues.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, yeah, it's really cool that we're talking about this because I'm actually going back and reading. I recently discovered that I could get the first issues of Spider-Man and some of the other Marvel IPs, and I've finished reading the first 50 issues of Amazing Spider-Man, and it's exactly what you say. Each story is self-contained. So in this comic, if he's fighting a rhino, it's just him and a rhino. It's just him and the lizard. It's just him and Green Goblin, and what is so common now that they have these like arcs that cover like 6-8 issues. I've only came across like I think twice. Once in those first 50 issues. Once when he was fighting against the Rhino, that was a two-parter. Yeah. And then there was another one with the Green Goblin that was also just a two-parter. It was just 2 issues, and then that was it.
Yeah.
And yeah, so that's like you say, that's the positive side to all that context knows that you can contain it into one 120-page issue, and that's awesome. And and I had a question. I'm completely ignorant to this because I jumped onto the whole indie scene like recently, like just a few years ago. Mm-hmm. I know that back when I went to conventions back in the day, indies were like just people putting money out of their own pocket to make these books happen. Is that how it was for you when you first started? Like how was, because now, for example, you could just ask people, I have this goal, please help me fund it, and then you get the comic. No, but how did that work back in those days before all of this? Absolutely.
I mean, you had to fundamentally you had to fund your comic, and you had to get it, and you had to print it. So whether you were going to go, you're going to go set up at a table. I mean, shows. There are some small shows today that are reminiscent to me of what shows were like back in the day. I mean, even like San Diego Comic-Con. I remember in the 90s when San Diego Comic-Con was a weekend show and it only had one part of the hall. You go in there, it was a bunch of comic book geeks like us and some booth babes and some retailers and some independent comic guys and an artist alley. That was it. So I mean, it's like you went there for comics, and the guys that made comics, they either made ash cans or they made full issues, and everybody just came out of pocket. You had to fully produce your book, you had to fully print it. I mean, and people are doing all kinds of things. I mean, it's like people are stapling their I did that. I stapled my ash cans, so it's like you're your own production house, so it was, like Brian was saying, I mean, it's like it was a totally different world, That's crazy. And that was smart. I wasn't that smart. I printed a lot of stuff, and some stuff I moved well, and other stuff I ended up, donating to go into packages to like folks that serve in the military, because I had so much of it. My wife was like, "Listen, this stuff is like furniture. This is just this is just sitting around the house."
Yeah.
So,
but I don't want to get rid of it. Yeah, I hear you.
Yeah, exactly. And it's like, and if you overprint and you're not selling all of that, and it's just sitting around, you're like, oh man, I'm turning my house into a warehouse.
Yeah, that's true. And is that how you came across Rod Looper? Also, did he come to a convention, or is that, or did you see him online?
So Rod is he's in Brazil. He's in Sao Paulo, and the way that I met him was through a forum. So back in the day, when you wanted, and this was a big deal, So we're talking in the early
digital webbing.
Digital webbing.
Oh,
I met him through digital webbing. And basically the way it worked was I put up, kind of like, so there were parts of the forums that were for, artist wanted or writer wanted. And I put like a description of, I called it like speed dating. So I put basically a description and then a whole bunch of different people, responded, like, oh yeah, that sounds good. I'd love to do that. And maybe, you get in contact via email, send some pictures back and forth. So one of his friends actually was the first person that I actually got on board for Black Tiger, and actually so Black Tiger and Magna are properties that I've had for a long time. So I had him give me a demo, kind of for like he did like some thumbnails for Black Tiger and some thumbnails for Magna, and then sequential art is a whole different. It's a whole different beast. He was an amazing pinup artist. Then he started doing the sequential art, and he's just like, man, I'm not built for this. So, but I've got another guy. So then he put me in contact with Rod, and Rod and I, we just hit it off really well. I as a guy who loves art, but never really became prolific at art, but loves art. I love the whole process of storytelling. I love to give kind of thumbnails and fully, give a full scripting of my story. So I'd never, and this, I guess I attribute this more to Michael Davis. I never scripted using the Marvel way. I always fully scripted, described my panels, gave thumbnails. And the whole point of that wasn't to say like, hey, artist, this is, this is the way it has to look, but it's like, this is the vision that I have. And these are the things that I'm trying to say. And, if you can portray this in a better way than I have laid out, let's do that. And oftentimes that was my process with Rod. So at first he was laying out just what I gave him. And then I told him, I said, listen, I honestly want your feedback. So then he started getting a little bit more comfortable. He's like, oh, I think we should do this differently, that differently. Then we're at a point now where he's just like, hey man, that's a bad idea. I don't think we should do it that way. Or, I see what you're trying to do. This is a better way of doing it.
Yeah.
And then basically, I think part of his goal right now is, everything that he can potentially show in the picture he shows. So my writing, it starts off like, I think it was when I read, if you've never seen, I saw the screenplay for Quentin Tarantino's, I want to say it wasn't Reservoir Dogs. I want to say it was Pulp Fiction. And basically it's a 250-page script, because at the beginning of the script, what he does is just a bunch of descriptions. So he tells you everything about the characters and everything about the world before getting into the script. So a lot of what I'm doing in my panels is I'm giving a lot of exposition, almost like I was a novel writer. And then what Rod ends up doing is Rod ends up showing as much as he can. So even in the parts that are the dialogue, I often find myself paring down the dialogue because he's showing things that I've said. So the writing process is completely iterative. You're always going through it. So it's like you write, you rewrite, you edit, you provide it to your your artist does an amazing job, and then all of a sudden, boom, 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 you realize that like I'm showing things that I'm saying things that are already being shown.
Yeah.
You know, so you can look at a final product and see like, man, that doesn't look like that was very hard to write. That looks like that was pretty streamlined.
Yeah.
But I guarantee you, it wasn't streamlined from the start.
Nice. Yeah, and
the production process it got there.
That's awesome. And have you do you feel that you have that kind of rapport with other artists, or is that
Well, with Marcio, I mean, he's already an established professional at the time when I worked with him.
Yeah.
So he already understands how that game kind of works. You know, so it's like I'll provide him with stuff, and for him it was more like I guess there were guidelines. It was that parlay. They were more like they were guidelines, very good guidelines. But he knew where I was trying to go. But he would be like, okay, you've given me the full vision of where you're trying to go. But this, I think this would be a better way to express it. And to me, when you collaborate like that, that's when you get the best,
nice.
out of both the artist and out of the story.
Nice. Awesome stuff, man. Just a second. I wanted to say hi to the people in the chat that have jumped on, because there's been a bunch of people jumping on. Paul, what's going on, Paul? Thank you for stopping by. I really appreciate you. We got Bionic Bruh, Mr. Jake. What's going on, man?
Yes, sir. What's going
on? The creator of Cobalt, and currently fulfilling, or I think already fulfilled. And Dojo, what's going on? I'm going to have Brian on. I want to have Brian on the show, I think, in October. But I want to pick his brain also because he's been publishing books for a long time. Also,
he's been in the game for a long time. He's got a lot of good wisdom.
And Hojo, what's going on, Hojo?
What's up, Hojo?
Thank you.
Making it happen.
For stopping by. And then comic artist JW, what's going on, man? Thank you very much. I appreciate the kind words. Yeah, man. Yeah, it must be awesome because Rod right now he's doing Bancroft's book, and he's a very busy man. And I'm happy for him. He does really good sequential work. I saw some of his panel work for what's this called? The Fractured Mind by Bancroft.
Oh man,
good stuff, man. He does really good stuff.
He gave me a sneak peek at like almost 30 pages of stuff he's done for Bancroft. That book is going to be phenomenal.
Yeah. It's going to be great. Yeah, good stuff. Good stuff,
and that's the beauty of it too. I mean, it's like there's such a wealth of just creativity in this community. There's such a wealth of talent, that we can all leverage off of each other and just help each other go to the next level.
Yeah, definitely. I'm currently working on my book also, and yeah, people have been really supportive and telling you like the ins and outs of how to get this done because. I mean, you read comics and then you know like where the panels go subconsciously, but the art and everything. But when you actually get down to it, it's almost like a science. It's like there's like do's and don'ts with the art and everything. And people have been really helpful. And people have been really helpful so far. With everybody, they're giving me information about what kind of paper to use, what kind of ink to use. How to format it. They give you recommendations on what books to read on how to write, and for example, now later on, I'll be picking people's brains for like how to crowdfund and what things to take into consideration because there's things like packaging, shipping, and the shipping also it takes a while and
printing
and printing also printing and then how many variants you should have. I think in this case for Black Tiger you have 2 variants.
I have three cover options. I guess you would consider the Rini one kind of the main one, and then there's a Rod Looper cover option, and then there's one from a guy named Eduardo Vieira Ramirez, who's super talented, and I've used him before for other covers. And I'll tell you the rationale for me and my covers. Each of these graphic novels, I still, even though they're presented in graphic novel format, I still write them as if I were writing floppies. So these 88 pages, in effect, are 3 issues. So each cover represents basically what's going on in a third of the book. So you know that I also produce the books digitally. So each of those 3 covers for Black Tiger, Hidden Dragon are basically the issue 4, the digital issue 4, issue 5, and issue 6 covers.
Ah, okay.
So
interesting.
Yeah, and then from the perspective, since the graphic novels are, basically those 3 issues combined, I want to make sure that people have everything. So you get to choose which cover you want on the outside, but then I put a gallery at the back so that you have all 3 covers.
Nice.
So you can have all the art. Awesome
stuff. And how long have you had this idea of Black Tiger, Hidden Dragon? Because I and when I first heard the title, just automatically the movie title came to my mind, Crouching Tiger, Hidden Dragon. But your IP was much sooner than that, right?
So Black Tiger. Black Tiger. I first started working on Black Tiger in 2001.
Wow.
And the whole premise behind Black Tiger, man, you cannot go wrong with that. That cover. Whew.
Yeah, but I love the colors on that.
Yeah, and so that's another person, Articida One. If you guys look up Articida One, like Articide, on Twitter, you'll find the colorist. He's a guy. His name is Charles, and he is phenomenal. He's also the one that did the colors for the Volume 1 Hidden Dragon Volume 1 cover, that Looper cover with the big dragon on the front. He's the one that did the colors for that. So I'm a big proponent of that guy as well, and I'm sure people are going to give him more work too because his colors are
they're on point.
When you look at that, the lighting, he's got the rim lighting. He's got it going on. What was I talking about, brother?
I asked you about how long have you had the story out?
Oh yeah. So
I jump into the colors because I have more questions about that also. Yeah, but go ahead.
Yeah, go ahead. I first started working on in 2001, and the thing with Black Tiger is I've been doing kung fu for a number of years, a couple of different styles of kung fu.
Oh wow!
And
nice.
Black Tiger. There are a number of different systems of kung fu that are called Black Tiger Kung Fu. So Black Tiger is seen as a system of kung fu, and if you watch like some of those old Hong Kong movies, like Once Upon a Time in China with Jet Li, like Wong Fei Hong, he's called the Tiger. I mean, it's a Black Tiger style of kung fu. So the whole point was, yeah, I know. Work.
Yeah, be safe, man. Yeah. You catch us on replay. We're going to continue talking. We're going to get into the kung fu stuff now. Because
yeah.
Go. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
No, you're right, man. I mean, and the kung fu stuff is for me was a big part of it. I mean, I love kung fu. I mean, kung fu theater and comic books. That was my stuff back in the day. I mean, those were my main forms of entertainment. So I mean, being able to implement something like kung fu and putting it into the story, having some elements that are historical, but also being able to add the fantastical to it, and that's what comics are.
John, just 1 second. I didn't tell this to the chat, but I had an emergency just for 1 quick second. I just had to step out just for 2 seconds. I'll be right back in just a moment. Just hold that thought, please. Just 1 second.
No problem.
Just 1 second.
No problem.
1 second.
So should I talk with you guys about Kung Fu? So I love Kung Fu. So, yeah, why not? So the first style of Kung Fu that I practiced was called San Tzu. And a very very aggressive form of kung fu. It was really, meant. Of course, all these systems were meant for self-defense. They started off, basically you have, farmers and, protecting themselves from bandits, and there's no, there's no one coming to save you. So you need to be able to protect yourself. So as a result, different systems were developed. Sansu was something that me and my friends started doing, and I think partially just because being young, we wanted to do something that was really aggressive. It's about how do you maybe stop a fight by taking out the first guy, breaking a bone loudly, those kind of things. So it was a very aggressive form of kung fu. There was still a lot of discipline that went along with it.
Did I miss something?
No, I was just telling people while we were hanging out about the first style of kung fu that I practiced, called Sansu, which is a very, very aggressive form of martial arts. So I mean, we would, and the great thing about it was, it was really meant for, self-defense. It was really meant for, how do you disperse a crowd? How do you,
Wow.
So, it focused on, breaking large bones, not just for the fact of just, incapacitating somebody, but also so you can get that sound, so that people can hear it and not want to have anything to do with you. Subsequently, me and my family, we practice a style called Fu Jiao Pai, and
Fu Jiao. Pai?
Yeah, Fu Jiao Pai.
Jiao.
Yeah, and that is actually one of the Black Tiger systems. So studying that, I had the opportunity to interview one of the grand masters of the system. I got to had the opportunity to do that a number of years ago. My wife and I did, and really, along with just learning the martial art, just learning a lot more of the history, and just kind of seeing how it's a really interesting history where basically the style got almost lost in China. So basically, with kind of the cultural revolution, there were folks that migrated to the States, and actually folks in the States were the ones that kept the system alive, and then brought the style back to China.
Wow.
So interesting story. It also makes for some fun story arcs that you guys will probably see in Black Tiger.
And so that would lead one to assume that the fighting and the choreography is legit to the style itself, as it's supposed to be practiced. Is that?
So there definitely are elements of it, but at the same time, I very much took the kind of a Hong Kong movie approach to it, because it's a dance. So it's a fight, but you have to make it much more of just a dance than just a fight, for it to be entertaining. So like a Hong Kong movie, yeah, these guys are martial artists, but the fight is much more flamboyant, than just what a simple maneuver would be. You have that kind of hyperbole in all the moves. So I bring that to the table. I want these fights to feel like, like those fun martial arts movies that you got to watch. Yeah. Keeping elements of some of the systems. So, you'll find capoeira in there. So using some of the basic elements of capoeira, but making it much more kind of grandiose. Kung fu, karate, which also uses some similar bases, but also some things that are different. And then of course things that are more like Muay Thai. So I have like one set of characters in the story. They're called the Five Fingers of Death. They're basically
nice.
They're basically masters of 5 different fighting arts. One's a pugilist, so a boxer. The other one's an escrimador, so he's a Filipino stick fighter. The other is kind of like one of those 36 chambers, kind of kung fu guys called the Touch of Death. You've got a shinobi. You basically have a ninja, and then you have a guy who's an African wrestler.
Wow.
So, being able to bring all these different kind of styles to me is fun. And, and I love to study those different kind of things anyway. So just having fun with it and putting them in comics.
Yeah, the research for that must be really fun.
It's fun. It's fun, man.
Yeah. That's awesome stuff. And just a second, I wanted to answer this question. Comic artist, I don't know if he's still in the stream or not, but he says, do I have dates on? I don't know if he's talking about my project or your project, but
why don't you start with yours?
Yeah. In my case, no. There's my comic is going to come out in the next 20 years. No, right now, in terms of my comic, I finished the writing of I did the outline for the whole story. So right now, I send it to the editor, and I'm looking with the editor. And then right now, we're in the process of like editing the thing out, exchanging ideas and seeing what works and what doesn't from my initial idea. And so I'm assuming it'll take about a month or so. I don't know how long it'll take for that to finish hatching itself out. But then hopefully, if everything goes smoothly, then I'll be able to start working on the first issue. Hopefully I could start do at least 1 or 2 pages of the first issue this year, if God willing. But if not, then next year definitely for sure. And yeah, so I'm doing that, and then I should be ready to work on issue 1, this year or next year. But I'll keep you guys updated. For the moment, I have nothing other than the 10-page short that I have been announcing. I'll show off the trailer. We'll do that some other time. But yeah, I just have that, and then then that's it. So I have no dates. I'm just still working on the writing process, and then I should start next year. And John, can you tell us dates for your crowdfunding? You're currently funding, and how long?
That's right. So the expectation is to deliver in January of next year, because the majority of the production is already completed for the book. So all the line art is completed. Basically, probably 3/4 at this point of the colors are completed, and about 2/3 of the letters. So nice. We're pretty far along the road on this. So we if we pushed, we could possibly get books out in December, but shipping is so expensive, and and it's so hectic. So we just figured it's probably better, to give the expectation for January delivery.
Nice.
For the books.
Awesome. And I want to come back to that, but I wanted to finish up with the kung fu idea because I love kung fu. Who's your favorite kung fu artist, favorite kung fu movie, and fight choreographer? Go. Your favorite movie?
Probably my favorite movie. It may be. Ooh, that's a tough one. Maybe Once Upon a Time in China.
Maybe oh, nice. Okay.
Once Upon a Time in China, which starred Jet Li, and that was also one of the when I was talking about that character, Wong Fei Hong, who's actually a historical character. But that series has Jet Li, but you got Donnie Yen in that series. You got all kinds of people. You got some really awesome female martial artists in there.
I love Donnie Yen.
Yeah. Like Rosamund Kwan, she's an amazing, martial artist from back in the day. She was in there, and I think in terms of and you also, you have folks like Sammo Hung that directed parts of that series. Wong Jing. So just high quality stuff.
Yeah. And your favorite martial artist?
So
One
the martial artist that got me into it all, of course, is Bruce Lee.
Nice.
You know, the movie that captured my imagination was Enter the Dragon.
Oh, dope.
You know, that was kind of the jumping on point for me. And then at that point, back when we watched network TV, there was Kung Fu Theater, and then all these different Hong Kong movies started showing, and man, that just opened up the world of martial arts. Master of the Flying Guillotine. So many just classic movies, and that's I was watching one movie with Jet Li, and this is actually, so he made movies first in China before he started making in Hong Kong. So it was early movies in China. He did one which was basically a Wu-Tang versus Shaolin movie. He was like one of like 8 brothers who were all Shaolin, being taught by Shaolin, and then like across the river was a master, and he had nothing but daughters, and they were all Wu-Tang. So you can already see where that's going. So you have like kind of needing to work together, and it's just fun. It's just good fun.
Yeah, good entertainment, man. That's what I like about it.
Yeah,
good stuff. Awesome. Is there a fight choreographer that pops out in your mind? Because I know, for example, like you can have like a really good martial artist, and you can have a good stunt team and everything, but there's like a guy who's choreographing the fights that he's really for example, the guy who did the choreograph, I forget his name, but he was in the Matrix movies, and he did a bunch of I forgot his name, but he was also a renowned choreographer. Is there anyone that that jumps off in your mind?
I mean, are you thinking like Yuen Wu Ping? I mean, he's so. Yeah. I mean, he's like the godfather, right? Yeah. Of Hong Kong martial arts choreography. Anyone that's watched anything that has has enjoyed any modicum of Hong Kong movies,
he's got his stuff on it.
Yeah. He's the dude. Or
awesome stuff, man. And and going back to the because you had mentioned how you had 3/4 of the art and the stuff done for Black Tiger. Is 3/4 about the sweet spot in terms of how much you should get done before you crowdfund? Because
no,
what is your opinion? Because some people say, oh, you should have the book completely finished before you crowdfund. There's other people say that don't do that because then it defeats the purpose of crowdfunding. Where do you sit on that?
I don't think there's a hard and fast rule. I mean, I've done some books where the production was completed. I've done like this book, the line art is complete. And my rationale for doing it is I want to be able to show people stuff.
Yeah.
But I've seen people who have crowdfunded books and done it successfully with maybe some pinups and a little bit of sequential art. I mean, part of it, there's a number of risks that come along with crowdfunding. You want to try and mitigate as much of the risk as you can. The more production you have done, then at least that point you're telling the folks, well, listen, you're going to get the book. I can't guarantee you're going to like it, but at least you're going to get the book. But there's nothing worse than the risk of just like flat out not getting the book. You're right. Yeah. You're just like, and we've all done that. We've all backed stuff, and you're just like, okay, I don't think that's ever going to come out.
Yeah.
And that's, but for folks that do that, they make it not just makes it hard for crowdfunding, but they've shot themselves in the foot with regards to how are you going to do subsequent properties when you haven't delivered on the first one. So I think the most important thing, honestly, is you don't have to have all the book done, but just knowing that, I mean, it's a serious stewardship of people's money. You have to get your book done. When you set your dates, give yourself leeway, because things that can happen will happen. And then also just be communicative. If your dates start slipping, let people know. The sooner the better. The more you communicate, the more often you communicate, the better. The toughest thing is, we've all backed books, and you're like, man, somebody hits a bump on the road and then they disappear. And you're like, what, you know, what's going on?
Yeah, that's happened a lot. Yeah.
You locked the thing. You took my money.
Yeah.
Right. You know, so it's just realizing that, like, I get it. You know, the crowdfunding sites are very, very careful in their verbiage to make sure that, you know, they don't posture themselves as, you know, just a store. But we have to take that responsibility upon ourselves and just say, like, yeah, we are a store. If somebody is going to put their money towards this, we got to make sure that we give them what they're paying for. And if it's going to take longer than we think it's going to take, we got to let them know.
Yeah, definitely. Awesome stuff, man. And you mentioned at the beginning of the stream that because you've seen this whole indie scene, Indiegogo, Kickstarter, you've seen this develop before your eyes, and you say that this is just the beginning. What do you foresee in the future? Well, what do you think could happen, or where do you think we're going?
What I think is going to happen with comics, we're seeing kind of an implosion in the direct market right now. And it's not the fault of the comic shop owners. It's really the fault of the producers, and it's the fault of the distribution. You know, we're inundated and oversaturated with a few properties, and they're being written by folks that don't love comics. And this distribution channel was really made to be a duopoly for kind of the big two. And then, because beforehand you could get comics almost anywhere. And my thought process, honestly, is I think over time we're going to see we're going to see more and more places where we're going to start seeing comics available. You know, it's gonna go back to just more of a mainstreamy type of thing. So it's like, those folks may not be hardcore collectors like us, but they want to read good stories. Yeah. You know, so it's like, you know, I know of a company. Is it Comics Mainstream? They're out of, I want to say, Arizona, and maybe getting the state wrong. But what they're doing is they're putting spinner racks in stores again. So they're putting spinner racks in mom and pop stores. I mean, you name it. You know, it may be CBD shops. It may be, whatever kind of store, barbershop, whatever. They're putting spinner racks in places where people just go, and also people take their kids, and they're starting to get traction. You know, for folks, because a lot of folks, honestly, if you don't know about the direct market, you don't even know how to get comics.
Yeah.
I mean, if you don't know to go to a comic book store, which still a lot of people don't even know exist, you don't even know where to get comics.
Yeah. I remember when I first got into comics, and when I was coming up getting comics, I always got them at the grocery store. Like at the grocery store where they had the magazines, they had a section full of comics, and then you see all the comics there, and then I would get my Wizards there. I'd get all the comics and get all the stuff down there, and then it wasn't until, like, I guess it must have been like months after reading my first set of comics from the store that I actually went to a comic book store, and that just blew my mind open, because I was like, oh man, there's a whole bunch of these. It's like, it's everywhere. They got toys, they got games, they got everything.
Exactly.
And, but yeah, if you're not a fan of comics and you don't know that they exist outside of the movies, it's really difficult to, like, make your way towards a comic book store. So it's
absolutely.
So
think about it. Going into a comic shop for the first time. I remember when I took my wife, she was my fiance at the time, and I took her to a comic shop. It's overwhelming.
Yeah, so much.
You know, it's like where do you go? What do you pick up? You know, so it's good to have an entry point for people. Hey, you know what? I'm enjoying this story. You know what? Where can I get more of this? Oh, there's actually stores that are dedicated to nothing but comics. And then okay. You know, so I don't think it's the end or the death knell for local comic shops. Local comic shops have already diversified. They're not even staying open based on new comics right now. They're selling toys, they're selling cards, they're doing games, they're selling old back issues of stuff. They're staying alive right now. They're not even staying alive with the new stuff that's coming from the big two and these other companies.
Yeah, they're transitioning to sell Funko Pops. Like I said, like all they do now is sell Funko Pops. Yeah, I hear that. Yeah, but they got to survive too, man.
They got to make exactly.
Yeah.
They got to make money too.
That's true, man. Excellent, man. So, yeah, thank you very much, John. I had a pleasure hanging out with you and talking about the comic. And so Black Tiger is currently funding. You got 18 more days, I think. Yeah,
that's right.
18 more days.
Up on it, people. It's really fun. Get it.
And there's no excuse because you got the digital option also. So I'm going to get that.
That's right.
Because the kung fu stuff. Yeah, I'm all about that. So, is there anything else you'd like to say to the people in the chat?
Just appreciate you guys being here. Support indie comics. I do think this is the way, and I think that we're all in a certain way. We're all kind of building the plane while we're flying it, so we're all figuring things out together. But I think we're growing the market, and when you go to shows, you realize that even in the comic book circle, such a small percentage of folks are either aware of or are involved with the crowdfunding space. So I think we just continue to do our thing. I think channels like yours are going to continue to grow. More and more people are going to continue to find us, and we just need to keep doing what we're doing. It's an ecosystem. Yeah, you need people that are making books, but you need people that have shows. You need people that are in chats. I mean, you need it all. This is a completely different ecosystem, and as long as we're all doing our piece, I think it's going to continue to grow.
That's very true. Yeah, definitely. Because I had no idea about this when I first came back in the comics. I was just posting art. Then I saw some of the people that were liking and retweeting, and I saw like what they were working with, and slowly and surely came into like what this whole thing is. And it's great. It's great, and we need more exposure. We need to get more people to get their eyes on these projects. And awesome stuff, man.
Absolutely,
awesome stuff,
man. Appreciate you having me on, brother.
No, thank you very much for coming on. You got plenty of projects, so I hope I'll have plenty of opportunities to bring you back on and hang out with you some more because there's so much more to talk about, for real.
Absolutely, man. Absolutely.
Thank you very much. And that'll be all for us today. Thank you very much to the wonderful people in the chat. Please be sure to get Black Tiger Hidden Dragon. I don't think I have the information in the description, but I will definitely put it. Hold on, let me got the information. It's in the chat, but I will put it in the description as soon as the show finishes. And please be sure to back the comic. Follow John. He's an excellent person. He'll help you out if you have any issues with anything. And then related to comics.
Yeah, I probably can't. I can't fix your roof or anything, but with comics, I'm good.
Yeah. So thank you very much, and I'll be catching you guys later. Be safe. Thanks, John.
Appreciate you, Elliot.
We'll see. I'll see you in the back room.
That's right.
All right. See you guys later. You guys have a good one. Be safe.